Hello, Star Trek fans. Welcome to ReBinge It. This is the ReBinge Star Trek Voyager podcast. My name is Kim.
And my name is James.
And we are rebinging Star Trek Voyager from the beginning, one episode at a time. Welcome back to the podcast. Today, we are on Season 2, Episode 17, Dreadnought. This episode aired February 12th, 1996.
It was very disappointing because this episode was not about the Dreadnought battleship, which ushered in the age of the big gun battleship.
Okay, it was also not about Dreadnought, the cool robot on Star Trek Prodigy.
Oh, yeah, that is a pretty cool robot. A little bit evil.
Yes. Before we get into this one, anything to say about the previous episode, which was Meld?
One of my favorite Voyager episodes of all time.
Yeah, that was a good one. Serious and dark. Oh, this one's pretty serious, too.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, we've talked about Voyager being weird, right? Just having a lot of weird episodes.
Yeah.
But these last two have been pretty on point.
Oh, it's been great.
Well, then let's get started.
Okay.
I have the notes, although you had to write them because I was traveling, so...
Well, it's nice actually having you in the same country to record in.
That's true. The last recording we did across the world, from each other. But today we're in the same house, just in different rooms.
Yes.
Okay, in the cold open, we open with the doctor, Kes, and the pregnant Ensign Wildman discussing baby names. She's thinking of naming her baby after her husband, who is named Gres Krendrick.
What a great name.
And the other two look a little bit concerned about this name. So she says she's also considering some simpler names, but the doctor knows bad things about every single name that anybody can come up with because he's been looking for a name himself.
His attitude seems to have improved at least 1,000% when dealing with Wildman.
Yeah, at least he's talking to her like a person now.
Right.
Yeah, like she exists. That's true. Kes very helpfully suggests a name called Benarin, which the doctor doesn't have anything bad to say about it, and It turns out that's her father's name. And Ensign Wildman, as she's leaving, she says, maybe Gres Krendrick, the hardest name ever given to me, would make a good middle name.
Yeah, it reminds me of one of those names people describe as a tragedy name.
I wonder how many times she had to practice saying that name. I mean, she doesn't have very many lines.
Yeah.
She's got to say Gres Krendrick twice. That's really hard.
I like how she does ask about the doctor if he's come any closer to deciding a name. And when he says he's gone through 500 different cultures looking for a name, he's a little picky, I think, is the thing.
Well, this is what's called overanalyzing something to the point where, you just are never going to get to the right answer. It's like you're looking for something perfect, but you've become so good at finding reasons that nothing is perfect.
And the doctor, of course, saying to Kes, "You never suggested that name for me." That was some great little banter there.
Yeah, that was cute. And so she suggests like her uncle or cousin. Yeah, and he's just like, yeah, whatever.
I do like how with the development of the Doctor and the program, you're seeing him having more human-like characteristics.
Mm-hmm.
Like this, with almost sort of it's too late now. I'm kind of picking on Cass in the way you might with a friend.
Yeah.
You know, the Doctor brings up how one of the suggested names is like an impolite word on the Bolian homeworld. Wouldn't you run into this all the time with different races? Certain sounds on one planet would mean something really insulting on another.
Well, yeah, that's what I mean when you're overanalyzing something.
Yeah.
If you have access to too much information, you're going to find something wrong with everything. Over to the bridge, and we are examining a debris field of a small vessel that was destroyed by a weapons fire of something that was pretty powerful. They seem concerned that the wreckage is made up of duratanium polyalloy, which is apparently something quite difficult to destroy. So I watched this episode twice, once on the airplane, right, on my iPad, which is not a great way to watch anything, but I really liked how she goes, duratanium? Like, like, oh, that's really concerning. I thought, she delivered that line really well, even though it's just another one of these made-up words. They send some of the debris to engineering for analysis, and B'Elanna has determined that the weapons fire signature is Cardassian. So Janeway, of course, asks if Seska is responsible, but B'Elanna says, "No, Captain, I am." And we go into the dramatic opening credits. We go now to B'Elanna giving a briefing about an experimental Cardassian weapon from the Alpha Quadrant.
Yep.
A somewhat disheveled-looking Tom comes rushing in late, apologizing. Very strange.
Yeah, he really did give a sense of he was disheveled. And really the only thing that looked different was just his hair.
His hair was mussed up, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like he just woke up. B'Elanna knows about this weapon because she and Chakotay got a hold of it when it malfunctioned and failed to blow up a Maquis munitions base. They nicknamed it Dreadnought. It's a self-guided tactical missile carrying a charge of 1,000 kilos of matter and 1,000 kilos of antimatter, enough to destroy a small moon. B'Elanna says it was unstoppable, a computer system that was adaptable, evasive, armed with defensive weapons. But being Cardassians, they armed the warhead with an old kinetic detonator, which failed to go off.
Oh, I thought that was perfect. Don't you think this is just so typically Cardassian? It's, if you like, the paint over rust. They've got this really cool computer system, and then they do something absolutely half-assed at the end.
Yeah, we cheap out on it somehow.
Right.
Well, they managed to get B'Elanna inside of it, and she reprogrammed it to go after a Cardassian fuel depot on Echelon 5. But the last time they saw this weapon, it was heading into the Badlands. They thought it had been destroyed, but now they think it got brought into the Delta Quadrant by the caretaker.
Yeah.
I bet he was disappointed when that one arrived and there was nobody in there.
There was nobody he could probe. That was very disappointing.
Yeah.
Okay, overanalysis. So you have a weapon that's this sophisticated and this powerful, and you use it against a fuel depot. What about Cardassia Prime? Right in the capital.
Well,
or what about Lacarian City? Save the Dominion the job.
Well, I mean, I don't know. But also what we find later is that it wasn't a strategic decision. B'Elanna just picked a target.
True.
So it's not like they really talked about it.
Yeah.
And she was perhaps trying to pick a target that wasn't a lot of people, but would have an impact.
Yeah.
And a fuel depot is not a bad thing to pick.
True.
You know, if you pick something like Cardassia Prime, it's got to get through a bunch of Cardassian security and defenses, whereas maybe this one place, it wouldn't take as much.
Okay, that's a good point.
And it's the kind of thing, if we think about maybe what the Bajorans would have done when they were resistance fighters, that's the sort of thing they would have done.
Oh,
right?
That's a good point.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, maybe it was influenced by that rather than perhaps thinking about the big picture of trying something big against the Cardassians.
Yeah, you don't have the luxury of picking the big targets, I guess is the point. Well, Janeway wants to stop the weapon before it causes any more damage. B'Elanna knows how to track it, and the plan is, once they find it, she'll get on board and disarm it.
Good plan.
After the meeting, Chakotay tells the slightly disheveled Tom that he expects people to turn up on time and properly dressed. Although, I don't know how he's not properly dressed. He just has messy hair.
Yeah, he looks like he has messy hair.
And Tom is about to react, but he thinks better of it, and he just says, "Yes, sir," kind of sarcastically.
Yes.
And then he leaves.
If you notice, in the background, Janeway is observing this interaction.
Yep.
And when it finishes, she leaves. I was like, oh, just keeping an eye on things.
Yeah, keeping an eye on, because she knows the two of them have a thing going on, and it's not good for the overall team.
Well, and it also, I think, plays into this problem Tom is having that we saw last week. He's slipping back into his old ways.
Right, yep.
He's heading off target.
Yeah, ever since being a salamander.
That's a really good point. I think it's really upset him. He's worried about his kids.
Yeah, maybe that's the problem. Well, Tom now is helping B'Elanna in tracking the device, but she's pretty distracted and a little annoyed.
Yeah.
She says Chakotay wasn't telling the whole truth in the briefing. She was the one who decided to send Dreadnought on the mission without asking for permission. She thought that she had thought of everything, like programming it to warn Federation vessels away. Chakotay wasn't annoyed. He just told her he was hurt. He thought he'd earned her trust and loyalty.
Yeah, this would explain your point of not thinking strategically. She was thinking of something immediate and in the moment that maybe was causing them trouble, rather than could be a big bargaining chip.
Yeah, she was thinking like an engineer. She wasn't. Yeah, she wasn't thinking like a military leader.
Right.
Well, she was relieved when the missile disappeared, thinking it was over. But if anything happens now here in the Delta Quadrant because of Dreadnought, it'll be her fault and no one else's. B'Elanna now asks Tom what's been going on with him, bringing up how he had a fight with another officer. But Tom just sort of brushes it off. Like, he gives some clues that he's unsettled, but he isn't really open about what's going on with him. So we don't really learn anything.
Yeah, he doesn't really give anything away.
Right.
And even, I would say, avoids the subject.
Mm-hmm. He's like, yeah, I'm fine. I'll just get a brush and brush my hair. Because even she says something like, look at you. And it's like, there's literally nothing on him that is off, except his hair is a little bit messy.
Maybe that's the point. Tom always has perfect hair.
Mm.
And the fact that it's even a little bit out of alignment means everything is going off the rails.
I guess.
In some ways, I'm surprised they haven't built more of this into the story by this point, because there must be a lot of the crew that were prepared for a 6-week mission and are now on a long-term flight from the Delta Quadrant. I mean, some of the Starfleet people maybe are trained and experienced, and this is fine, but there's the Marquis, maybe even some of the Marquis as well. But there's got to be a lot of people that I signed up for 6 weeks, and now I don't see my family for 70 years.
Yeah, we've covered it in small amounts here and there. Like in that episode with the guy who could control their fantasies or, what was going on in their brains. We saw a little bit of it there.
Oh, yeah.
And we've seen it a bit with Harry missing his girlfriend. We've seen it a bit with Janeway missing Mark and the sweater and the dog. But B'Elanna, she's an interesting case because she's kind of flourishing here.
Yeah. Well, that's really what Tom brings up, isn't it?
That's true, he does. But it's because she didn't really have anything else that she really felt like was home to her. She had found a team in the Maquis crew, but she still got most of that team except for Seska. But, now she's got a new team, so I think she's the one maybe doing the best in this environment. So they've touched on it, but they haven't, I guess, wallowed in it. Yeah. And I think you'd have a pretty different show if they did wallow in it, right? It would be a lot darker. This show could be a lot darker.
Yeah. You don't necessarily want to go down there because you don't want to make the show a downer.
You've got Battlestar Galactica as soon as you start doing that. And that's just not the show they wanted to make. They wanted to make a Star Trek show. Although I can see why people are like, yeah, but how is the ship perfect every week? And how is nobody ever depressed about not being able to go home? It comes up in small places, but it's just not the overall theme.
Maybe some of these problems could be remedied if they had a counselor. The Doctor could read some counseling books.
Well, yeah, I guess if they had a counselor, at least you would think that they were talking about it.
Yeah.
But we kind of feel like, oh no, everybody's just supposed to be fine.
Suck it up, which is always a great way of dealing with emotional problems.
Yeah, especially when, you're almost killed week to week.
Harry's fine with it.
Yeah. On the bridge now, B'Elanna helps them track the missile with her inside knowledge of how it works.
Yep.
When we catch up with the missile, we finally get an image of it on screen, and it's a little vessel the color of the Cardassian ships, kind of orangish rust.
Yeah, it follows that Cardassian trend of that sort of boring rust color.
Yeah. B'Elanna says its targeting scanners have been activated, which means it's locked onto its final target. It seems to be headed for a heavily populated Class M planet. At its current speed, it will arrive in 3 weeks. Big drama into the ad break.
This is a classic Voyager end-of-scene dramatic where both her and Chakotay do the serious stare and into the ad break. Well, it's so funny.
Yeah. I mean, they do that on Next Gen too.
It's kind of a thing that, it's really kind of lost on shows now.
Because there are no ad breaks?
Yeah. And there's certainly not as many ad breaks.
It's like watching soaps. There's so much time where they spend, just looking off into the distance as we go into commercial.
Yeah.
I'm sure they still do it. We go now to the treacherous crewman having another FaceTime with the Kazon, saying Seska will want to know about this immediately.
Seriously, nobody's detected this yet?
I guess not.
Because we get the impression he's talking to him daily.
Yeah, but he's got that flashing red thing. That's what's keeping his signal hidden.
Nobody's noticed that, him just carrying it around.
Apparently not, no. Oh, and we do learn that his name is Mr. Jonas, the lesser-known brother, apparently.
Oh, the one they don't talk about because he's working for the Kazon in the Delta Quadrant.
Right. He's telling the Kazon about this Cardassian missile, of course, but they're still not letting him speak to Seska. And then he's forced to cut the comm link because of another outgoing transmission.
I'm sure this guy is the one in charge of monitoring outgoing comms.
He must be, yeah, because he knew it was coming.
Because, Tuvok, as an experienced security officer, should realize that he should be changing roles around frequently.
Yeah.
To expose anybody doing nefarious things. Because I think that would be a way of exposing people hiding stuff like that if their role changed frequently.
Yeah.
You would discover things that might be hidden clandestinely.
Yeah, that's kind of funny if you think about it, because there really is no sort of cross-training that goes on. You're in a role and you're there forever on Star Trek.
There were different shifts.
Yeah, different people on doing the same thing, but they weren't moving to different roles.
It seems like an odd thing in the Star Trek universe that so many people had absolutely pigeonholed roles.
Yeah, never thought about it before.
Like the poor guy stuck doing dishwashing in Sisko's dad's restaurant.
Yeah, he's definitely still doing that. On the bridge, Janeway is calling the planet Rakosa to tell the First Minister Kellen that there's a missile heading for them. He thinks that she called to make a threat, telling Janeway about her reputation for destruction. She very calmly says the Kazon are spreading these false rumors to prevent them from making allies.
So this guy's been listening to the Kazon.
Yeah.
So he's an idiot.
Right.
Why would you believe the Kazon if you're a race there? They're violent, aggressive pirates.
Well...
And they rock up and you say, hey, these guys are the bad ones. Oh, yeah, I believe everything they say.
Well, they don't have to necessarily be speaking to the Kazon. If the Kazon are talking to a bunch of people, right, it would get spread like wildfire.
So even in the Delta Quadrant, people making unsubstantiated, ridiculous rumors, all the morons believe it.
Fake news.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Janeway tells him that they're trying to disarm this missile, but he is suspicious. He has put their defenses on alert and will be watching their progress closely. It's like, okay, dude, I'm trying to help you.
Well, I noticed Janeway doesn't bring up, oh yeah, and the person who programmed the missile, yeah, she's on my crew.
Yeah, well, I don't think that's a good time to share that info. She can share it at the party later.
Yeah, don't invite B'Elanna.
B'Elanna now beams over to the missile, which scans her and then welcomes her, even asking if she slept well. And she's being asked, by the way, in her own voice.
Yeah, what a pleasant missile. It's like those robots from a couple of weeks ago.
Oh yeah, I'm going to bring that up later. She spends a lot of her time in this episode talking to her own voice, which is funny. The computer is convinced that the planet is its target, not believing B'Elanna's story that Dreadnought is now in the Delta Quadrant.
Yeah.
She explains how it got to the Delta Quadrant and reinitializes its navigational systems. Dreadnought does eventually agree that it is in the Delta Quadrant. It stands down and deactivates the target lock. The missile is shutting down its engines, and she puts the computer into power save, beaming back to Voyager.
I think it even wishes her a good night as well at the end.
Yeah, I think it does. It might have been, wise to think about a self-destruct at this point. Let's just get rid of this thing.
I know, that's... All right, over-analysis now.
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't you want to make sure something this dangerous really was 100% shut down? I mean, completely disabled.
Yeah, especially since it got confused. Like... There's no reason why it couldn't happen again.
Right, like permanently shutting down or disabling its propulsion.
Yeah.
Can you eject the warp core on it?
That would have been a good idea, yeah.
I would think you'd want to make absolutely sure this thing couldn't work. I mean, maybe even removing the hard drive from the computer so it can't boot.
Yeah, she got a little cocky.
Yeah.
I think what's funny is she underestimated herself in this scenario. Well, back on Voyager, Janeway's meeting with Chakotay and B'Elanna. They're planning to salvage the missile for parts. But Tom calls to say, of course, the missile just started up and jumped to warp, and it's back on the heading to Rakosa 5.
Initially, I thought, why didn't they just blow it up? But this is a very good reason why you might want to keep it around. It has a lot of useful parts on it. And I can very much understand why they might want to salvage it.
Yeah, I think, though, as usual, we're not cautious enough, and we should have considered a tractor beam or something, to hold it in place. But we're just like, it's fine. B'Elanna says it's fine. Well, now it's jumped to warp 9, so they only have 51 hours before it reaches the planet, so things have just gotten a lot worse.
It's gone off the rails, and Janeway once again must be going, dude, can I catch a break?
No, every week something terrible happens. So Voyager is following Dreadnought now, and it's no longer allowing B'Elanna to transport over.
Yep.
Janeway jumps to her preferred plan, let's just shoot it, and they launch some photons, but it has no effect, with Chakotay saying, it's adapted its shields to our weapons.
Yeah, and this is because she wasn't in a tank top, sitting in the chair, pressing buttons, firing the phasers.
Yeah, that's true. If she had the tank top on and, dirt on her face, it would have gone much better.
Exactly.
Well, now the missile hails them, and we hear B'Elanna's voice telling them to stand down their weapons, saying they're interfering with a tactical mission against Cardassian aggressors. B'Elanna starts questioning it, but Dreadnought tells them it is determined B'Elanna is being coerced by Cardassian forces.
Part of the Delta Quadrant deception, as it calls it.
It goes on to inform her that she programmed it with 39 potential Cardassian threats, including her potential capture and coercion. Janeway tries to convince it that it's in the Delta Quadrant again, but the computer describes the possibility as negligible and terminates comms.
This was really good and pretty funny if you're a software developer, because this is exactly like what happens when you go back and look at code and your first reaction is, who wrote that? And then you realize it's your own code and you've forgotten all the bits to it. And I've come across this. There's a really helpful comment like, this verifies the input and accounts for change. Oh, great. Thanks a lot. I really know what that means.
I remember running into a comment in my code that said something like, I know this doesn't make sense, but don't change it. I think I couldn't figure out why it worked, but I was just like, you know what? I just got to move on.
So I think it is pretty good that B'Elanna can't remember all the things she programmed into this.
Yeah, she's like, I never did that.
Yeah, this was scenario number 7 that you programmed in. Oh, I did a pretty good job on that, didn't I? So in some ways, it's excusable that maybe she didn't think of everything.
Oh, well, yeah, for sure. A lot's happened since then.
Oh, right.
Janeway and Chakotay basically now just stare at B'Elanna, and she has a technobabble solution to destroy it using a tachyon beam. And
yes,
of course, without thinking about it or talking about it, we're just like, do it. So we jump right in, and it does start to work, except the missile eventually sends a plasma surge back up the beam to Voyager, blowing EPS relays all over the ship and disabling warp and impulse drives.
Yes.
It's funny how when that surge happens and Harry is like, oh, something's happening. And then they show it and it's really slow. Like it's coming up the beam super slowly. And you're like,
oh, yeah.
You had plenty of time to disable that beam, but we didn't do that.
Oh, something's happening. Yeah, maybe you should have shut it down before it happened, Harry.
Yeah.
Just a thought.
Come on, Harry. Meanwhile, the missile is fine and it resumes its course. B'Elanna looks mortified.
So, can we excuse Harry not immediately terminating the beam and shutting it down by a lack of experience? He doesn't feel like he has maybe the authority or the experience to go, hey, there's something coming back up the beam. Maybe I should do something about it.
Well, maybe.
Whereas a more experienced officer might go, okay, I'm shutting this down. Something potentially dangerous is happening.
Well, yeah, because he notices a surge, some kind of power surge on the other end.
Yeah.
And it surprises him. And he just goes, he's like, wait a minute. But then he doesn't do anything.
Maybe that inexperienced thing.
Maybe.
That happens in the real world where a junior doesn't take corrective action because he figures, well, the guy above me knows what's going on, and then everything crashes.
Yeah, maybe. Janeway calls the First Minister again, saying their engines will be back online in an hour. The minister estimates casualties of 2 million people if the missile hits. So he's deploying their fleet to intercept it, even if their capabilities are no match for the missile. Janeway suggests not sending their fleet on a hopeless mission. She says their chief engineer's their best hope to find a solution, but he says they can't just sit and do nothing.
He does point out as well that they're not a warlike race and they don't have weapons like Voyager does. And this got me thinking. I'm thinking next year's budget, there's going to be a new category of planetary defense spending that's going to be significantly higher percentage of GDP.
Well, how we've talked about before, Voyager's just leaving a trail of destruction behind them because they're going to leave this planet and this planet is going to have like a whole new thing to be afraid of now.
Yeah.
And they'll probably change their political landscape. It'll probably change everything.
Yeah, they're going to now become a local, regional military power because of this.
Yeah.
You're right. Trail of chaos.
It's going to be bad.
This leads me on to something I've been thinking about, especially as this race says they're not warlike.
Right.
You're in the Delta Quadrant, which seems to be even worse than the Gamma Quadrant for the quadrant of...
jerks.
Yes. And you have aggressive races like the Kazon and also the flaky skin people, the Vidans. Wouldn't you just, if you wanted to survive, have to militarize, have to have planetary defenses and be more aggressive? If you're like, the Vulcan hello, if somebody invades your space, you blow them up and ask questions later. You would think it would be extremely dangerous for any race not to be very well protected.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, the Kazon they're not really interested in conquering, so I don't know what they're just interested in fighting each other.
Well, they talked about territory and owning territory.
Yeah.
So you would think they would also be more aggressive against other planets.
Yeah, they're probably quite annoying.
Or maybe that's the thing. They're not really conquering. They're more kind of annoying. They're more interested in being like pirates.
Yeah.
And just stealing stuff rather than we want to plant our flag on every planet.
Yeah, and we haven't really run into any big conquering alien yet.
Yeah.
Everybody sort of keeps to themselves in this quadrant.
Maybe that's actually the point. This is a much more isolationist quadrant than they've come across. Yeah, okay.
Because there's not a lot of really super advanced aliens that they've come across.
Not yet.
Not yet. Harry and B'Elanna are trying to transport across to the missile, but to no avail. B'Elanna is kind of beating herself up about not doing the job right the first time. But Harry is pretty encouraging, telling her, I bet Dreadnought doesn't spend time worrying about what it could have done differently.
I like that from Harry. That was good support by a friend of like, why are you beating yourself up?
Yeah.
You can't know every path and every outcome and every consequence of the stuff you do. So don't spend your life focusing on it.
Yeah. B'Elanna she's struggling with this one.
Yeah.
She feels bad about what she did in the first place, and now she feels responsible for this, and she's not necessarily working with anyone to solve it. She's just being mad at herself.
Oh, yeah.
We haven't seen this relationship between the two of them lately, so I do like this moment.
Right.
And you can see in the scene that she's defiant and angry, and she tells Harry, okay, Starfleet, give it another try. And this time it works, and she gets back on board Dreadnought.
I think she does that Starfleet when she gets irritated with Harry. It's that Klingon side coming out. It's like, you're telling the truth, and it's annoying, so I'm going to call you Starfleet.
Yes. Back on board, the computer is polite again, asking if she's having a pleasant day. It has shut down all of the programmer interfaces and even shocks B'Elanna when she tries to open a panel.
It's still being very pleasant, even if it's completely evil.
The Rakosan fleet now arrives, and Janeway tries to get them to pause while B'Elanna is on board, but they just go for it. Voyager tries giving them some covering fire with phasers as they attack. B'Elanna tells Janeway not to beam her out, saying she's making progress and she just needs to get to the central processor.
Yep.
The computer, though, reroutes command and control functions through protected backups, cutting B'Elanna off just when she was starting to make some progress.
Teaching everybody an important lesson about backups.
Yes. And also, I mean, you've got an AI here, and she's got to know it's listening. She knows it adapts and learns, because we've talked about that already. But while she's carrying on conversations with Voyager, she has to recognize that it's listening to her, but she doesn't seem to.
Yeah.
Outside, fighters attack the missile, all scoring hits, but they're vaporized by the missile's plasma wave. Voyager keeps shooting as two more fighters make a run, and they too are vaporized. Voyager's shields are down to 40%, and the Rakosans withdraw. The missile has won again.
I have an overanalysis point about this.
Okay. Janeway tells B'Elanna they've only got 1 hour and 9 minutes until it reaches the planet. And then Dreadnought cuts off comms once it realizes that B'Elanna has finally figured out it's listening to her. She starts to try to activate the detonation circuit, making the computer reassess its assumptions. She starts playing hypothetical games with it, getting it to at least consider the possibility that if key sensor programs were damaged or deleted, databanks would be compromised. Through this, she manages to get the computer to show her its databanks, and she finds the existence of some original Cardassian files.
Yes.
The computer, though, abruptly finishes its reassessment of the situation and has decided that B'Elanna is now cooperating with the Cardassian Federation Alliance, and it turns off life support. Whoops.
I really like this. The computer really does seem to have an answer for everything.
Yes.
And I don't know if it's just me, but I got a real 2001 A Space Odyssey vibe.
Oh, yeah, I can see that.
The interaction with the HAL 9000.
Yeah, where it just keeps going, Dave. It's the same thing here. It keeps, it keeps calmly saying her name. It also does inform her that the final detonation sequence has been activated.
Now, so it's turned off life support.
Yep.
So why couldn't it do something like either vent to the outside or pump some kind of gas into the living area to terminate B'Elanna?
Well, it's not trying to kill her, because later it says, just beam back to your ship.
Oh, I didn't consider that.
Mm-hmm.
It was just trying to intimidate her.
It was just trying to stop her. It wasn't trying to kill her.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
Which is good, right? Because it could have very easily.
Well, yes. That would explain why it's not being more aggressive in trying to kill her. It's trying to force her off the ship.
Maybe it sees her as its creator.
Oh.
The builder.
Oh, wow, that's deep. Maybe B'Elanna, being a good programmer and put some code in saying, you can't kill me under any circumstance.
Don't kill B'Elanna.
Yeah.
Yeah, like at the end of every single module, go to don't kill B'Elanna.
Yeah. Oh, so it worked out. Hey, I can intimidate her and I can try and suffocate her, but I can't kill B'Elanna.
Right.
Smart programming there.
Janeway now is talking to Minister Kellen again, and she informs him she's prepared to use Voyager to detonate the missile. He's surprised she'd sacrifice herself to save a people that they didn't know 2 days ago. Janeway replies, to save 2 million people, it's not a hard decision. Kellen tells her, your reputation in this quadrant isn't deserved, Captain. You've made a friend here, just as you're about to kill yourself.
Yes.
Even though there's only 40 minutes left, she still hopes for a better resolution.
Oh, this is pure Starfleet here.
Yeah.
This is the classic needs of the many.
And I guess here's how I know I'm a Trekkie, because like I said, I was watching this on the airplane, and maybe it was exhaustion or lack of oxygen being on an airplane. I don't know. But this is where I started crying. I pretty much cried for the rest of this episode. It's just so Star Trek.
Yes.
That moment. And there's a lot more of it yet to come in those last 10 minutes.
It's the lack of questioning what the right thing to do is.
Yes, exactly.
And I feel it's also it doesn't matter if it's not my problem. She didn't cause this problem.
No.
But she's going to do whatever the hell it takes to solve it.
Star Trek. To save people.
Yes.
And she's only met one guy.
Right.
Like on the 37s. She only met those 3 guys. Well, over on the missile, as she runs out of oxygen, B'Elanna keeps working, trying to access the Cardassian file. But Dreadnought just tells her to return to her ship. Back on the very dark bridge on Voyager. It's always so dark on Voyager.
Yeah, they're saving power, so they're on full dim.
Oh, right.
Because, they blew up all the EPS relays.
Yeah, but the light was on in her office where she was talking to the minister guy.
She's the captain. She gets the one light bulb that's still working.
Okay.
That is one of the things I do love about Voyager. The use of the lighting, especially to set the mood. It's very cinematic in its use, and I really appreciate it.
Janeway now tells Chakotay and Tuvok a large antimatter explosion like a warp core breach would set off the missile. She orders Chakotay to evacuate the ship using the escape pods. As the non-senior staff leaves the bridge, Janeway initiates the self-destruct sequence, and Majel Roddenberry confirms warp core overload in 20 minutes.
That is also so Star Trek. We've got to blow up the ship at some point.
Yep.
I noticed Chakotay didn't argue about being sent off to evacuate the crew.
Well, he did for a second. He grabbed her arm and she just goes, I don't have time for this. But also, his job is to save the crew as the first officer, so get moving.
That is true.
On Dreadnought, B'Elanna has restarted the Cardassian operating system, and we hear a Cardassian computer voice. The computer programs now start fighting with each other, and we hear the 2 different voices battle for control. It's actually quite funny.
It's pretty good, yeah.
Mm-hmm. While they fight, B'Elanna manages to open an access panel and enters a conduit, but she's starting to run out of air. She's breathing really hard and sweating.
Yeah.
On Voyager, Harry gets comms and transporters back so Janeway can talk to B'Elanna. She tells her of the self-destruct plan, but B'Elanna tells her she's going to detonate the missile by breaching the containment field with her phaser. And she starts cutting through the magnetic constrictor casing. What I was thinking here is, beam some oxygen over,
Oh, yeah.
But she just says the air is thin. She doesn't tell them that the missile's trying to suffocate her.
Yeah. And if they can do that, couldn't they beam her over another phaser so she could shoot it with 2 of them? Make it twice as fast?
Yeah, with 2 at the same time. Would have been quite handy. Janeway relieves the bridge crew, taking over the helm. Tom, who of course pauses for a moment, but he leaves. But before he leaves, he says, "Thanks for everything. That got me too."
Oh.
I was crying so much at the end of this episode. Tuvok requests to stay with her, as it's logical to keep a second in command should she be unable to complete the mission.
Okay.
Yeah.
I feel this should have been Tom. You can't leave Chakotay behind as the only senior officer, because the surviving crew would all be dead in a week. Look what happened to the Protostar crew.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah.
You need Tuvok there as well to look after the crew.
Yeah, because you don't even have B'Elanna. God, you're down to Neelix and Chakotay.
Yeah. You need Tuvok, and Tom should fly the ship.
I guess at least you have Tom. I didn't think about that. That's a mess.
Yeah.
But I would have been really mad if it was Chakotay in this moment, considering what a crap leader he's been. If he had stayed behind, I would have been really mad.
Yeah.
It needed to be Tuvok because of their friendship.
I think it should have been Tom. I think Tuvok is too valuable.
No, I see why you say that. I totally understand why within the context of the story you would say that. But in terms of the emotional impact of what's going on here, it needed to be Tuvok.
Oh, okay.
Because if you think about what happened last week,
yes,
where he had his ranting moment where he was really disparaging and awful to her, and then at the end he was just like, I really respect you and we're friends.
So what you're saying is this was Vulcan guilt, which they're not supposed to have.
No.
That he wanted to make things up with Janeway.
I'm not saying it's Vulcan guilt. I'm saying it's the right emotional storyline.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. I'm being completely irrational and saying this is all about my emotions in this moment.
And I'm saying it's Vulcan guilt over him going off on Janeway last week.
There's also the moment when she calls over to B'Elanna and she's just like, no, just give me a minute. And Janeway does a total eye roll. Oh my God.
B'Elanna's awesome in this episode.
Oh, she's not given up. Back on Dreadnought, and the computer informs B'Elanna the Cardassian virus has been neutralized. She's like, good for you.
Good job.
And the containment field is at 40% and falling. This is the field that B'Elanna is trying to destroy.
Yep.
The computer reports B'Elanna is about to lose consciousness, and if she stops, life support will be restored. Voyager now down to 3 minutes before self-destruct, and Janeway calls B'Elanna saying this is her last chance, but B'Elanna says she's almost finished, and we get a good eye roll from Janeway. She's like, there's 3 minutes. I really like
2 more
that.
minutes and we'll be fine. You could admire B'Elanna's determination here.
Well, because she feels guilty. There's a lot of guilt in this episode.
Yes. And her bravery. She's going to blow the damn ship up, Jean-Luc.
They're all ready to blow themselves up.
It's a competition.
Down to 2 minutes now. Containment field is at 20%. The computer is still trying to get B'Elanna to stop, saying, perhaps the Delta Quadrant hypothesis deserves further consideration.
Oh, the AI has now gone down that path and is trying a different form of deception.
Yeah, B'Elanna laughs. Nice try. She finds it funny after all the time they've spent together. They're now out in the Delta Quadrant trying to kill each other. She finally does break through, and Tuvok reports the field is collapsing. Janeway orders her beamed out as we see the missile exploding and Voyager veering away. 1 minute remaining on self-destruct as Janeway shuts it down. A very Galaxy Quest moment.
That really was the classic, how many seconds do we have left?
Oh, that was fun. Janeway calls B'Elanna, but the doctor reports he beamed her directly to sickbay, describing her as singed around the edges, but she should make a full recovery. And we see an unconscious B'Elanna with a few nasty-looking burns.
Yes.
And Janeway says she forgot about the doctor, and he says, how flattering.
Oh, that is a great little piece of humor inserted at the end.
It was priceless at how much drama there has been in these last 10 minutes, and that was super funny.
And the doctor's reaction, lovely piece of dark humor.
A relieved Janeway taps the console and orders Tuvok to retrieve the escape pods, and she kind of smiles as the episode ends. And yet again, another near-death experience, which we will never speak of again.
Oh. I really liked it when she just sort of tapped the console. That seemed like a very human, yes.
Yeah. Did we actually win something?
Right.
All right, let's go to over-analysis.
Okay. The first one I have is, so the computer was monitoring comms and could learn from what they were saying. Why didn't they try something along the lines of misdirecting the computer? And Janeway saying, good job, B'Elanna. It thinks the dummy moon is the base. So the computer would go, they're trying to trick me into hitting the wrong target. And if it's that paranoid, which it seems to be, then it might disable the mission. Yeah.
This is where I think we were in a little bit of trouble just relying solely on B'Elanna. Like nobody else was working on anything, trying to, come up with other ideas. We were just letting her go over and be the only person responsible. And that's not exactly teamwork. So I don't know if it was because they just didn't have time or what, but the number of times where something really serious has been happening and we go and sit in the conference room and talk about it, but we didn't do that here. And I don't know. I do think that was a bit of a failing, maybe on B'Elanna's part or on Janeway's part, right? To just be like, she never once said ideas. She was just like, oh, B'Elanna's got it. I guess that's just trust in her because she was the one who programmed it.
I guess, and if they've got the transporter working, what about Harry trying to beam out the antimatter containment into space? And then it doesn't matter if the missile hits, it can't actually destroy anything.
Yeah. Yeah, I just think we didn't talk about ideas enough. And they didn't seem to really understand that it was listening to them until it was too late, which is surprising.
Perhaps that is part of B'Elanna's problem. She didn't realize quite how good it was that putting this set of 39 scenarios into this AI that would then study them and refine them and learn.
And over time, it would add to them.
Exactly. And clearly, she's given it a big database because it knew about the Treaty of 2367. It's like, how much stuff did you put in there? So perhaps that's the problem. It was, from step one, it was an underestimation of what the capabilities of this weapon were. Perhaps because they didn't understand it.
Yeah, and a real lack of understanding of AI, which is what this was.
Yeah. Oh, it certainly evolved into,
Mm-hmm.
And yet another great Star Trek evil AI, and this one's in a missile.
Yep.
And that leads on to, so wouldn't the computer also use star charts to correctly identify the planet?
I was wondering that too.
it would use the number of planets in the system, the view of constellations to figure out what the planet is. This leads on to a theory. Part of B'Elanna's guilt that she's feeling here is because she half-assed the job.
Oh.
Perhaps she skipped a few steps in the targeting and went with a good enough approach. Oh yeah, the planet's blue, it's about this big, it's a third in the system, it's got an oxygen atmosphere, head over there and blow it up.
I mean, all that could be true, yes. Or it could just be because of some damage. The data banks were damaged, so it didn't matter.
Oh, so you're thinking that the computer, there was actually corruption there, so it was incorrectly picking the first thing that was even slightly close.
Well, yeah, because the star charts wouldn't have matched anything that it was seeing, so it had to be damaged in some way. I mean, I guess it's possible that part of the reason she was feeling guilty was because she hadn't worked hard enough on it, but I think that's headcanon. I don't think we saw that, because I think instead she was really focused on it being corrupt in some way.
Yeah. Interesting point. Okay. I will accept that as a good answer.
Like, I couldn't have made a mistake. I just think they were so compressed on time.
Yeah.
They weren't necessarily thinking through all of the scenarios, because we went from, it's going to hit that planet in 3 weeks to, we only have a few hours.
3 hours,
really quickly.
Right.
And panic set in.
Because it jumped to warp,
Because we never talked about using the deflector dish or a tractor beam or anything to try to change its target.
Yeah, 9 out of 10 problems can be solved with the deflector array.
Exactly. We didn't try picking something big up and throwing it at it.
What about a shuttle?
Yeah. And why do they never think they can program the ship to just do something without them on it? Why do they always have to be on it? It's a computer.
Well, it's a computer that's clearly not as good as the one that was in the missile.
I guess. Let's not take that computer. That thing is dangerous.
Okay. Interesting that you said throw things at it, because that leads on to my next point. So this planet, 2 million people are going to be killed, potentially, let alone ecological damage and whatever it would do to the environment, maybe even poison the atmosphere, all sorts of trouble. So they send out their ships, and they make 2 attack runs and a total of 5 ships before they give up. In an event that will kill millions of your people.
Yeah.
I feel they didn't try very hard.
An apocalyptic event is approaching. Yeah. Did you think about, ramming your ships into it to try to make it explode? Yeah.
Exactly. That's where I was going. And so do these people have warp? Could they detonate their warp cores in front of the missile or get close enough and detonate the warp core? Could they grab asteroids using tractor beams and throw hundreds of asteroids at this thing? Or even find a moon or something they could throw at it?
Well, they made a point of saying they weren't militaristic. So I guess we're to believe maybe they just really didn't have very strong weapons. But again, where are the creative ideas to try and do anything to stop it?
We put 1,000 asteroids between it and the planet. Yeah, try and navigate that safely. Because we all know what the possibilities of successfully navigating an asteroid field are.
Pretty low.
Next thing, possibly the last thing. So, how much junk is there in the Delta Quadrant that the caretaker has just brought in there?
Oh, yeah.
Is it all stuff from the Badlands, or is there all sorts of junk floating around in the Delta Quadrant that he pulled across?
Yeah. Different aliens, different ships.
Yeah.
Different floating pieces of junk.
There could be all sorts of technology floating around that he just brought in and went, oh, yeah, that doesn't work.
Yeah, that doesn't work.
Toss it off into space.
Forget that.
Yeah, can't probe it. What's the fun?
Yeah, he's just littered the entire quadrant with junk. Is that your last point?
And I think that wraps up my overanalysis. Over to you.
I have a few things.
Yes.
First of all, the chat between Tom and B'Elanna, I quite liked.
Yes.
Because he was, he said something about being sort of envious of how she's found her niche with the Voyager crew. And I sort of like that, because I think they've been struggling to tell us what is going on with Tom.
Yeah.
And I thought it made sense that he, at this point, would hope that he would have found a better way to fit in and to feel better about himself. But he's not there yet, but he has watched B'Elanna really do something positive. So I like that. And then also how she sort of turned it and said, what is going on with you, man? I like that. I thought it was a very realistic conversation for a change. You don't get those very frequently on Star Trek, and I liked it.
I think the thing with Tom that's fascinating and probably would be explored in a more modern show would be the lifetime of Tom's father and his environment of you're not good enough.
Yeah, exploring his sort of thoughts of underachievement a bit more, right? Because they brought it up in Threshold, but really badly in that episode. But there's something there that they could be doing more with.
I think you'd see that in a modern Trek.
I totally agree. My next point is we transport B'Elanna at Warp 9. I thought that was hard.
No, Voyager's a more modern ship, so it's pretty easy. And it was only if you were in a shuttle that was difficult.
I don't think so.
You're bringing up the conversation between Kira and Jadzia about transport at warp, right?
Well, not specifically, but we've talked about it in many shows.
Yeah.
That's something that's difficult to do, but we pretend like we're not even moving because we have other problems in this episode.
Maybe that was a lost part of the story, that B'Elanna was also doing something extremely brave of transporting at warp. And Harry is like one of the few people who can actually pull it off.
Well, because they talk about it in the episode where Chakotay is on the Kazon ship trying to get the thing that Seska stole, right? The transporter module.
Right.
And B'Elanna's like, I know how to do that. I can transport at warp. But everybody says, no, that's bad. That's dangerous. But here it's like, oh, now it's no biggie. We can do it. No problem. My next point is not an analysis, but it is a observation, which is that I hope that they had a big party with the Rakosans at the end and actually made some friends.
I hope so. That would be a very positive outcome for a change with Janeway.
Yeah.
And nobody mentioned about B'Elanna.
Oh, yeah. Don't tell them what happened. But it's just, I said it, I think, a few times that I really need them to get some wins, right? Because it's been really frustrating. And this is a win.
Oh,
they
absolutely.
made a friend. They saved the people on this planet. So I hope that, they went down there, had a big party with them and made some friends. I just think that would have been important for everybody.
And they upheld Starfleet ideals.
Yeah. And they showed these aliens in this quadrant that this is what the Federation is about.
Yeah. Don't believe the fake news.
Don't believe the fake news. So my last point is it's interesting to me that this showed B'Elanna's interest kind of in AI and the robots.
Yeah.
And I was thinking that they should have aired this episode before the robot episode, because then it's like she would have been trying to sort of make up for this mistake with that robot.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
You could actually write that into the story.
Yeah. Because instead, like, they did that thing of her being a mother, which was dumb.
Yeah.
We didn't buy that. But I would have bought this.
Like I said, it's an engineering challenge for her. And this is a previous engineering challenge that went horribly wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could totally tie that in. That's a great idea.
See, now, I don't usually overanalyze. That's your thing. I just normally have points I want to make. But there's my contribution to overanalysis, is I think these episodes were out of order.
Yeah.
They should have done prototype after this episode.
That would work really well.
Just for her character development.
In B'Elanna, when she's building this other robot, she could have put in her piece of code, the go to do not kill B'Elanna under any circumstance.
Yeah, that would have been smart. Okay, that wraps up my overanalysis. I don't have anything in women in the future because, as usual, women are just doing their jobs on this show, so that's good. I don't have a lot in Leadership Corner. I mean, we talked about the few concerns about leadership that I had. Like, we weren't brainstorming, coming up with more ideas. I thought that was a little bit weak and really out of character as well for the show.
Yeah. Janeway loves to brainstorm.
Yeah, and shoot, right? Those two things, those are her favorite things. But I do think maybe there was just some panic set in because of time.
Yeah.
And we also had a little bit about Chakotay and what he did when he learned what B'Elanna had done back when they were in the Maquis together. And this leadership style of guilt is not...
not terribly good, is it? No.
Terribly effective. Yeah, it's not impressive. But we don't need to dwell on Chakotay. He was a tiny part of this episode, so I think I will just leave it at that.
At least Chakotay managed to carry out the evacuation successfully.
Yes, he managed to save his own skin, which he's proven good at. So let's go to rating. Thumbs up, thumbs down, or neutral. What is your rating?
Despite some of the flaws you pointed out, absolute thumbs up. This is a great episode. It's a great Trek episode. It's a classic Needs of the Many. It's Janeway being heroic. It's B'Elanna being heroic. It's Tuvok feeling his duty to stay with his captain. So much of this episode just works really well. Any sins that it has, I can totally overlook them and just say, this is a good story. 2 thumbs up. Thoroughly enjoyed it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's lots of little things to pick on, but I loved this episode.
Yeah.
I thought it was great.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, I'd totally give it a thumbs up. We've talked about it before. It's like we pick on things in Star Trek because that's what you do when you watch 800 episodes or however many there are in Trek, most of which we've seen. And of course, you're going to pick on little things. That's part of the fun of us doing this podcast. But I mean, this is a great Star Trek episode. So loved it.
Absolutely agreed. Such a great episode. I did love how B'Elanna was just so determined to fix what she saw as a mistake. It kind of reminds me of Rock in Prodigy.
In the Tribble episode, yeah.
Yes. She was beating herself up about a mistake. And this is B'Elanna kind of doing the same thing.
Which is why I think it would have been so much more interesting to have the prototype episode next for her. But here we are, 25, 30 years later. How many years later?
30 years, I'm afraid.
Well, we could obviously rearrange all the episodes in Star Trek to make it all make more sense. That'd be quite a task.
That really would. I wouldn't want to do that. Actually, I would want to do that because there'd be some episodes that would actually disappear.
Yeah. There'd be a few.
They'd be placed into a box and buried out in the desert in Nevada somewhere.
Yeah. There's a few racist ones, a few sexist ones, and there's Threshold. Yeah. We'd get some in a box. Get rid of them. We'd bury them. What was it? It was that E.T. video game?
Oh, yes.
We'd just bury them with that.
What's the story? 25,000 cartridges in a landfill.
Oh, my God. All right, I think that wraps up Season 2, Episode 17. Come back next time for Episode 18. In the meantime, if you'd like to send us your over-analysis for this or any episode, or if you just want to say something nice, you can email us at ReBingeIT@gmail.com. You can also reach out to us on the socials. We are on Threads, Instagram, and YouTube at ReBingeIt. Or you can join the Facebook group, facebook.com/groups/Star Trek TTM podcasts.
Thanks for joining us on the ReBinge Star Trek Voyager podcast.
That's it for me.
And that's it from me.